Hey, this is Katrina Bird, and welcome back to my channel. So, today we're going to talk about the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, especially now that it's been FDA approved in the United States. So, if you're interested, please keep watching. So, as promised, we're going to talk about the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. So, let's get started. So this map may look familiar. It's the Hopkins World Map that kind of basically shows all the COVID-19 cases in red. As you see, hotspots include Europe, United States, India. As of December 20th, over 75 million people have had COVID-19 infection with over 1.6 million deaths globally. Regarding the United States, we have about 17.3 million cases. So we are the world leader in COVID-19 cases. However, the United States only make up for about 4% of the world's population. India has the second highest number of COVID-19 cases, but also has the second highest population in the world behind China. So I just want to do a brief reminder that when you hear the word COVID-19, specifically that means coronavirus disease 2019. When you see SARS-CoV-2, that means severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. And so that is specifically referring to the virus. All right. So unfortunately, this disease has devastated many people, economy, caused a lot of depression. So when this occurs, when we have a disease that's really causing high mortality and morbidity, we want to figure out how can we prevent other people from getting it. So this is what we call primary prevention. We want to intervene before adverse health effects occur with a specific disease through a measure such as vaccinations. Basically, we want to vaccinate you so that you don't get infected. So let's talk specifically about how vaccines work. So first, we give you the vaccine because we think that this is something that is going to prevent you from getting sick, and this is how. So when the vaccine enters your body, it causes your body to have an antibody response. So these antibodies are produced by immune cells. So the body has a natural protection, which is called the immune system. One of the ways in which it fights off infection is that it creates antibody. So when the infection gets in the body, these antibodies recognize, hey, you're not supposed to be here, and helps the immune system fight it off. So the vaccine will cause your body to create antibodies. Then when you get infected with SARS-CoV, and this is the virus that causes the COVID-19 disease, the body basically blocks it or significantly controls the infection. So this is overall why we want as many people as possible to get vaccinated, because we want this virus to be stopped in its tracks since it's caused so many issues all over the world. All right, so let's go through a little bit of basics of clinical trials because as you know, there are two FDA approved vaccines in the United States, the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna vaccine. They had to show us that, hey, these things work. So they did that by conducting clinical trials. So let's just go through a few basics. So the first phase of the clinical trial is called phase 1. This is usually conducted on healthy volunteers with the goal of determining how frequently we need to give the medication and if there are any serious side effects. Then you go into phase 2 and 3 clinical trials. So phase 2 determines or basically enrolls people with the disease. And we want to know, number one, is it safe in people? And number two, are there any short-term side effects? Phase 3 enrolls a larger number of people with the target disease, or in this case, healthy people who we're trying to prevent COVID-19 in. And we want to know, number one, is the drug safe? And number two, is it effective? And the last phase occurs after FDA approval in the United States. So this is designed to enroll a significant amount of people, again, looking for, is the drug safe? Is it effective? And what's the optimal use? So, all right, so let's just get to it. Let's talk about the Pfizer vaccine first. This is the first one that was FDA approved. So let's get started. So the actual name of the vaccine is called BNT, likely stands for BioNTech, which is the German company that co-sponsored this vaccine development with Pfizer. So the image on the far left is the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It's basically what it looks like. And the purple spikes are very unique to this virus. We call it the spike protein. Whenever you make a protein, it just doesn't happen. You want to start from a very basic structure called RNA, ribonucleic acid. So scientists have been able to figure out what is the unique RNA that will produce the spike protein. They took this piece of RNA and basically stabilized it by doing a few mutations. So now they have the genetic structure in order to create the spike protein. And from there, they decided to make a vaccine. One thing about mRNA is that it's very unstable. And once it gets into the body, it can be easily broken down by enzymes called RNases. Therefore, scientists have created this lipid membrane or lipid coating to surround the mRNA to stabilize the structure, therefore making it stable enough to create a vaccine. So once you receive the vaccine, the mRNA gets incorporated into certain cells of the immune system called antigen presenting cells. So these include macrophages, dendritic cells, for people who like to know the details. So proteins within these cells read the mRNA and eventually produce spike proteins, which are the same spike proteins that were found on the SARS-CoV-2 virus or the coronavirus that we saw initially. These proteins will then stimulate the immune system to produce antibodies and other immune cells to fight off infection from SARS-CoV-2. So this is very, very, very important, and ultimately we want to prevent people from getting sick. All right, so let's talk about the primary data. So once the Pfizer vaccine was given to the FDA to study, they were gracious enough to publish their phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial data in the New England Journal of Medicine. So we can look at the data that they submitted to the FDA. So let's just go through the details. It's important to know these details so that we can really make a fair assessment. Is this a good vaccine or not? All right, so we're just going to kind of go through a little bit of detail how it was done. So again, they're publishing a phase 2 and 3 trial. So they enroll over 40,000 patients from all over the world. About 150 sites were from the US. And these patients were primarily 16 years or older. I can already tell you that there were people younger in the study, but they only published the data for patients or participants who were 16 years or older. So half of these people received the study vaccine, which is the BNT 162b2, and half of the people received the placebo. So just so you know, this study was done all at once. So one main criticism about the COVID-19 vaccine is, oh my gosh, these things were done really, really, really fast. Well, Pfizer and BioNTech decided to do all the phases at once. So they've already published data from the phase 1. So this particular paper focuses on phase 2 and 3 results. Additionally, this study was randomized. So basically, if you were a participant in the study, you were randomly placed in groups. There wasn't any criteria in regards to which group you would be placed in. And it was placebo controlled. Additionally, this vaccine requires 2 doses in order to be as effective as the researchers want it to be. So this is what they found in the phase 1 clinical trial, is that they got the best immune response if they used 2-dose series. It would be very convenient if we could just use 1 dose, but for this vaccine, it worked much better if participants received 2 doses. And what I mean by much better, that they got a higher immune response. All right, so let's just kind of go through a little bit of the study characteristics, because this is important because we want to know, are these results generalizable? Are these results that we can say applies to as the greatest number of people who comes from various backgrounds as possible? So, as you see, it was split about half. Half of the people, it's not exact numbers, about half of the participants received the study vaccine and half the participants received the placebo. There were people who ended up dropping out for various reasons that we won't go to in detail in this talk. In regards to sex, it was again about half and half, but I want to focus on the race and ethnic group. So when we look at, this was a global study, but I'm just going to focus on the United States. So in regards to participants who are identified as Black or African American, about 9.2 or about 9% of the total study population identified as Black or African American. When you look at people who identify as Hispanic or Latinx, about 28% identify as such. So, and then additionally, you see other race and ethnic groups reported here. So this is important because huge criticism we have in a lot of these trials are they don't really have as diverse of a study population, but it looks like this group did make a concerted effort to actually include people from diverse backgrounds. Additionally, and this is just briefly going to go over, the majority of the participants were from the United States, followed by Argentina and Brazil. The majority of people were in age group 16 to 55, but they did have a number of people over 55. And as we know, COVID-19 really affects the elderly. So it's really important to have these people involved. All right. The median age was 52, which is also pretty good. And they also included people who were obese, which is another risk factor to having severe COVID-19. All right, so let's now talk about, is this vaccine safe? So this study kind of differentiate between local and systemic reactions. So we'll just go through the details. So this table basically shows the percentage of study participants who ended up having pain at injection site, redness, and swelling. I really do apologize. I forgot to put the labels. So again, this is pain at injection site, redness, and swelling. So for the initial study group, after the first dose and participants aged 16 to 55, about 83% of the participants who received the study vaccine had pain where they received the injection. However, only about 14% of the participants who received the placebo had pain at the injection site. So pain at the injection site was a pretty common feature for people who got the study vaccine. However, when you look at redness and swelling, not many people had issues with that. So 5% of the study participants who received the vaccine had redness at the injection site, and compared to 1% of people who received the placebo. And 6% of participants had swelling at the injection site who received the vaccine compared to 0% in the placebo. And the same information was looked at for participants over the age of 55. Basically, it shows the same trend. Majority of people had pain at injection site when they received the study vaccine, and not so many people had redness or swelling at the injection site. I didn't put the information, I didn't put these charts after the second dose because they were pretty much showed the same trends. And again, when you're talking about the number of people, the 16 to 55-year-olds, there are about 10,000 people who they looked at this stage. And for the participants over 55, there were 7,000 people, just to give you some perspective. So we just talked about the local reactions to the vaccine. So let's talk a little bit about how the vaccine affects the rest of the body. So the two most common side effects were fatigue and headache, occurring around 50% of participants. In regards to some of the more serious side effects, less than 20% of people had fever. Between the placebo group and the study vaccine group. Additionally, some people had the following side effects. So some people had swollen lymph nodes. 4 patients had the following injuries. 1 person had a shoulder injury related to the injection of the needle to give the vaccine. Another person had swollen kind of lymph nodes under the right arm. Another person unfortunately had a heart arrhythmia, and the last person ended up having kind of numbness, tingling in the right leg. The paper really didn't go into detail in terms of why they think this happened to people. In regards to death, there were unfortunately 2 people died in the vaccine group and 4 people died in the placebo group. However, the study says that this had nothing to do with them receiving the vaccine. Some people died of stroke, some people had heart attacks, but again, the paper doesn't really go into detail in regards to that. All right, so now let's look at efficacy. Basically, does it work? Basically, if I give you the vaccine, will it protect you or prevent you from getting COVID-19? All right, so this is a study vaccine. It was over 18,000 people received this study vaccine. So overall, in participants who received the study vaccine, and we're talking about over 18,000, only 8 people got COVID-19. That is compared to, again, in the placebo, over 18,000 people got the placebo, and there were 162 people who ended up getting COVID-19. So they use specific modeling, which I'm not going to go into detail, but basically they determined that the vaccine was 95%, the efficacy was 95%, right? So here you have a confidence interval. The one thing about a confidence interval is it basically shows you how precise this measurement is. So 95, if you do this study over and over and over, 95% of the time, the vaccine efficacy will land in between these numbers, 90 and 97%. So that's actually pretty good. The other thing is the confidence interval is very small. So the smaller the confidence interval, the more precise the measurement is, and the better quality. That basically means the quality of the data is pretty high. They also broke this down by age group and how basically they broke down the vaccine efficacy by age group. The reason why I mentioned the confidence interval is because if you look at participants over 75, none of those participants got COVID-19 in the vaccine group, but 5 did in the placebo group. However, if you look at the confidence interval, you have negative 13 to 100. This confidence interval number is very large. And so this right here, the quality of this data is not good. So based on this information, we really can't, say that when they break it down in subgroups that this is true, that this vaccine efficacy is 100%. I think that I wouldn't take away that, okay, well, the vaccine isn't going to work in people over 75. I just don't think that they had enough numbers. They didn't have enough people to really make a determination based on, people over 75. I don't think they had enough participants. But when you look at the overall, the data is pretty good saying that this vaccine is the vaccine efficacy is 95%, in which with high quality data. All right, so let's talk about the Moderna vaccine. So we don't have published data on the phase 3 clinical trial that is ongoing. I'm sure the data will come out. So our knowledge is a little bit more limited when it comes to this vaccine. But let's just go over a few things that we do know about it. All right, so this should look familiar because this is another RNA-based vaccine. So I won't go through the details, but just overall, the coronavirus has a unique protein called spike protein. So scientists figure out, okay, what's the basic genetic material that makes that spike protein, which is mRNA. So they coated this mRNA in a lipid coating because the RNA can be very fragile and unstable. So they wanted to create a stable compound that they can create a vaccine. So once the vaccine is injected, the mRNA gets incorporated to the antigen presenting cells, and these cells end up producing spike proteins on the outer surface of their cells. And so these proteins stimulate the immune system to produce antibodies, which ultimately fights the SARS-CoV virus, or the virus that causes COVID-19. So remember, the Pfizer vaccine requires 2 doses. The Moderna vaccine also requires 2 doses, but you have to separate the 2 doses by 28 days, which is different than Pfizer because you only need to separate it by 21 days. The other thing is it excluded participants less than 18. So the Pfizer vaccine, if you look closely, they actually included participants as young as 12, but they only posted data for participants 16 and over. Likely they didn't have enough participants between 12 and 15 in order to really report the data. So, however, the Moderna vaccine trial only looked at participants 18 and older, and they didn't include anyone who was HIV positive. So, however, the Pfizer vaccine did. So HIV is a disease that we really do need people included in the study. So the other thing is the dosing for the Moderna vaccine is different. It requires 100 micrograms per injection, whereas the Pfizer is only 30. But that's probably because the formulations of those vaccines are different. Some of the similarities are that they both did not include pregnant women or women who were breastfeeding. So that's a big thing going on now. Like, okay, is it safe in women who are pregnant? So both of these vaccines didn't look at that population. However, it's an important study question. VSafe is an app that the CDC has created in order to track any side effects that anyone who receives the COVID-19 vaccine may get. So once you get vaccinated, your healthcare provider will provide you with the information fact sheet that looks very similar to this, and it basically goes through step by step what is V-safe, how you can participate, and basically this fact sheet is primarily given to people who have received the vaccine. Also, it makes it very easy. It gives you a website, so you can go to this website, or you can use this code down here to with your smartphone to log into the website. So this is a really good thing. I encourage anyone who gets a vaccine to participate, because if you're having any adverse effects, it doesn't really help if you keep it to yourself. You want to make sure you not only let your healthcare provider know about it, but you also sign up for this app so that the government can know about it. So we want to learn from everyone. So a few take-home points. Number one, do I think the vaccine is safe? I would say yes. A lot of the side effects that were reported, like fever, headache, fatigue, we see in a lot of other vaccines that we're currently giving, like influenza and a few others. So overall, I think it's safe. One thing I did not mention that you probably heard about is Bell's palsy. So 4 people in the Pfizer vaccine arm ended up having Bell's palsy, and 3 out of the 4 people in the Moderna study ended up having Bell's palsy. So this is something that the FDA recommends that we actually keep a close eye on. I don't know if this, and we're talking about 7 people or 8 people got Bell's palsy out of like 70,000 study participants. So relatively small number, but still serious side effect. Okay, so this is something we'll have to keep an eye on. But overall, I think it's safe for the majority of people. Do I think the vaccine is effective? Yes. The data is pretty good overall, so I do think the vaccine will be effective. However, you've probably heard that in the UK, there's a new COVID-19 strain. Will these 2 new vaccines cover that strain? I'm not sure. Will we have to get this vaccine every year? I'm not sure. But I wouldn't be surprised, especially if this virus is going to mutate frequently. This might be a vaccine that we'll have to get every year, just like the flu vaccine. Overall, I feel very confident about the studies. I was fortunate enough to have already received the first dose of the vaccine, and I feel pretty good. I'll post a follow-up shortly. So overall, thank you for looking at my video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and click the subscribe button. Additionally, I encourage you to go to my Instagram page, because I do put kind of cliff notes of these videos on my Instagram, so you can, check it out at your leisure. All right, thank you. See you next time.